Thank you very much, Julie. There has been little room for compromise between the parties since Democrat Tony Evers took office as Wisconsin governor at the beginning of this year. With Republicans controlling both the Senate and Assembly in the Badger State, the state budget was pushed through this past week with little support from Democrats. Can lawmakers find common ground? Well, joining us now is Senator Janet Bewley, a Democrat from Mason, who is Assistant Minority Leader in the Senate. Senator, thanks for being here. Any idea what the governor has done so far? He has not signed the budget, has he?
No, he has not. He has three choices: do nothing, veto the whole thing, or veto part of it. Now, we know he's not going to do nothing, because if he does nothing, it becomes law in 6 days. So we have to find out now just how much of it he's going to veto.
If you are a bettor, do you think he's going to veto a part of it or all of it?
I really don't know. He's not given many clues other than the fact that he's going to veto significant parts. So significant parts could mean the whole thing.
So you said that it becomes law if he does nothing in 6 days.
Right.
So in Wisconsin, there is no danger of a government shutdown.
No, we have no kind of drop dead point where we go without having the ability to spend money. It merely continues, government continues to function, and we're basing it on past budgets. So it's as if the old budget was in place.
An $82 billion budget, will it do well for your part of the state?
Well, it depends which version of it we take. By doing well, I always think about the well-being of the constituents that I have. And the first thing they think about is health care. Health care and schools are the two things that are always on their minds. The Republican version of the bill really kind of took away the underpinning of the governor's medical budget, because he wanted to accept the Medicaid expansion. That was paramount to building his budget. The Republicans removed that part of it, so it's almost like a game of Jenga. You take out that significant part, and you basically have to build a new budget. So I'm hoping that we're going to find a way to give the people what they voted for when they chose the Governor Evers rather than Scott Walker, and that was Medicaid expansion and better funding for our schools.
Are there some key provisions in the budget that was passed that you do feel will really benefit northern Wisconsin?
Well, I think that if we look at the budget based upon how it was done in the past, we can see a little bit of the daylight, the oxygen that a Democratic governor brought to the process, because of course we have the ability to uphold his veto in the Senate. So Republicans are going to want to be at least a little bit aware of the kinds of things that they're going to have to do. Now, they're gestures. I said they're sort of like having a Spider-Man Band-Aid on my nephew's elbow. It's not enough, and it's not durable. The budget that the governor proposed, built around accepting the Medicaid expansion money, will affect far more people, 82,000 people almost to be exact, that will be able to enroll in Badger Care. Now, without it, they can't. So we really need to look at the few things that the Republicans did with a pretty hefty grain of salt.
You said better funding of Wisconsin schools. What will happen to the schools if they don't get the funding your party wants?
Well, I think one of the primary examples of what the schools need is the full funding of special education. Right now, the schools are funded about 27% of the cost of special education. That means the rest of it has to come out of their general fund, out of the money that they use to hire teachers and keep the lights on. So what the governor did, Governor Evers proposed 30% the first year, 60% funding of special education in year two. And the Republicans are keeping it about 27, 28%. It's simply not enough for the school districts to be able to constantly have to dip into regular money in order to give the students who deserve special education what they need. We need more money from the state for special education.
Of course, roads and bridges are always important to everybody, no matter where they are in the state. I understand there are funds now to study mileage-based fees and tolls in the state. Is that a good option for transportation funding?
I think to study, that phrase to study, people want the roads fixed now. They want a durable source of revenue now. They don't want more funding for studies and plans and pilot projects. They want the holes fixed now. And in order to do that, the Republicans came up with the increase in registration fees. So someone on a fixed income is going to have to pay the same increased registration fee rather than anything on a gas tax. Others have said that a gas tax would be more fair, not to disparage people from Minnesota, mind you, but people from other states could come into the country and help fix our roads if there was a higher gas tax. Right now, the burden is going to be on all those people who have to register their cars every year.
Speaking of roads, there was a lot of flood damage last year. What's the status of that right now? Have enough funds come in to make the necessary repairs in your area?
Well, it's interesting because it will be a reflection of where the money came from. So the roads that are all fixed are federal roads. So federal highways, Highway 2, federal, fixed, and one of the quickest ones that was fixed. State roads, yep, they're in pretty good shape. It's the town roads. County roads are all right. Town roads are still tough. And there are towns that, in order to make up the difference in the amount of money that they got to pay for the floods, they turned roads to gravel, and they're not doing the repairs. So the towns are suffering still.
Minnesota has a number of new laws that take effect about the middle of summer every year, around the 1st of August. Are you looking at some new laws for the state of Wisconsin that will now take effect this summer?
Not really. One of the things that we know we need to do is come up with the tax reciprocity. That is one of those things that we haven't figured out, and we still have to do it. It makes it easier and more fair for people to be able to know what to expect when it comes, if they live in one state and work in the other. We have to figure that out.
Reciprocity for education as well? Or?
Well, education, we have figured out the education part of it. So they're treated as resident of each state. And we have that for all of the adjacent states. So we're okay with that part of it. So when the University of Wisconsin raised its tuition for non-resident students, didn't affect Minnesota.
What about property taxes? Impact of the budget on the average household in terms of property taxes and businesses too in Wisconsin?
Well, for the most part, property taxes are frozen in our state. They're not going to have a lot of room to go up or down. And the amount of money, they can only go up if revenue from the state goes down. So if anything happens to property taxes, it's because the state is kind of shrinking what they're contributing. Now, if you've got a referendum for a school, that could raise property taxes. But for the most part, property taxes will only go up if the towns or whatever municipality isn't getting the consistent aid from the states. Then they are allowed to raise property taxes.
Senator, you've been fighting for a bill that eliminates tax deductions for moving expenses for businesses that are leaving Wisconsin and moving to another state. What's the status of that?
Signed it into law. And
did?
We did. This week on Monday I came down, I went to Madison and we had a bill signing, and it's law after about 4 tries.
I was going to say, in past years it didn't get very far, but it did this year.
Well, see, and perhaps that's another case of what happens to the climate when you have a Democratic governor. There's far more willingness to talk across the aisle because the Republicans need us a little more. If they have a bill or an idea that they would like to put forth, it doesn't veto-proof it if there's a Democrat on the bill, but it certainly gives it a little more stability. And if I can negotiate with a Republican on a bill and my name is on the bill, the Republicans are going to have a little more comfort that the governor won't veto it. So suddenly we have a little bit of significance in that building, and it feels pretty good.
So did you get a sense that there was significantly more bipartisanship because now the Republicans have to deal with the a Democratic governor?
Well, I think that in the early stages of the budgeting process, it felt like it, because indeed there were Republicans who said that they were open to accepting Medicaid expansion. But the closer and closer you got to the so-called finished product, the more the Republicans were sort of pulled back in line, and they could no longer be as cooperative or willing to negotiate. And in the end, in both the Senate and the Assembly, only 2 Republicans voted no on the
Senator, I'm going to
budget.
have you hold on to a microphone there. They're going to hand you a different microphone.
Oh,
so
right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, that happens once in a while.
Down, you talk with your
Well,
hands.
I talk so much.
Yeah, it pulled it down. So
There, all right.
all right.
Do you think in some ways divided government is better for taxpayers than having one party control everything?
It's certainly more representative when you have, because if you look, just the fact that we had a Democratic governor elected, that means the majority of the people in the state voted for the governor, for a one person majority of the people. But if you look at our districts, and if you look at, say, the state assembly, it's about 2/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrat. That's called gerrymandering.
Yeah.
And that means that it's harder for people in the minority to have their voices heard.
Let's talk about gerrymandering a little bit. Exactly what is it? And I know the Supreme Court just refused this past week to look at issues of gerrymandering.
That's correct. Right now in many states, it is done by the legislature. The political lines, the districts are drawn by the legislature, so that when you have a majority of one party in both houses, they can pretty much draw whatever map they want. And indeed, some states have slight gerrymandered districts, but not as severe as Wisconsin. It's like I said, 2/3 of the assembly is Republican, whereas we elected a Democratic governor. So it's a matter of how severe are they. And in Wisconsin, they got to the point that they were so severe that it was felt that people were not adequately represented. So you can do, even if the legislature continued to have the power to draw districts, you can still do the right thing and make them competitive. But they didn't. But now, of course, the Supreme Court said that they will not take it on because it's a legislative.
Was that a good decision by the High Court?
Well, it didn't make me very happy. Was it a good decision? I've heard people say that there is merit to it based on constitutional law. There's nothing in the Constitution about that, and so it is up to the states then. Usually if the Constitution is silent, it becomes the state's responsibility. So, and that is the interpretation that the court took. I always thought that there could be more of a rights issue involved, that you have the ability to vote, and if your vote is not counted in the right way, I thought perhaps it could, but I'm not a Supreme Court justice, so clearly they didn't take my opinion about it.
Well, thank you so much for coming in tonight. We really do appreciate you being here.
I appreciate it so much, and the next time I won't gesture quite as much.
Thank you,
Oh,
Senator.
we want you to. Be animated.